Hello, I'm Coach Hill with Cutie Learning, here today to talk about the PF topic, which is resolved the United States should substantially reduce its military support of Taiwan. To say this is a big topic would be an understatement, particularly since this is an ongoing topic. I mean, just the day the topic was released, President Biden decided to give Taiwan another $1 billion worth of support, which means that you're going to have to keep researching throughout this topic, and you're going to have to every day make sure that your links still work and also that your arguments are relevant. Let's get started.
Let's begin with the history of Taiwan relations. In 1949, after the Chinese Civil War, the Chinese National Party, KMT, retreated to Taiwan, establishing it as the Republic of China, ROC, while the People's Republic of China, PRC, was established on the mainland. The U.S. initially supported the ROC. In 1971, the UN General Assembly recognized the PRC as the legitimate government of China, leading to the loss of Taiwan's seat at the UN. In 1979, the U.S. established formal diplomatic relations with the PRC and acknowledged its One China policy, which claims Taiwan as part of China. However, the United States also passed the Taiwan Relations Act, which allows for continued arms sales to Taiwan and maintains unofficial relations, what we now refer to as strategic ambiguity. In 1982, the U.S. and PRC reached a mutual agreement on arms sales to Taiwan, and the U.S. agreed to gradually reduce arms sales while ensuring Taiwan's self-defense capabilities. In 1995 and 1996, tensions escalated when the then Taiwan President Lee Teng-hui visited the U.S., prompting China to conduct military exercises near Taiwan. The U.S. responded by sending aircraft carriers to the region, demonstrating its commitment to Taiwan's defense. In 2000, Chen Shui-bian, who favored Taiwan's independence, was elected president. His administration's policies strained relations with the mainland and raised concerns in the U.S. about stability in the region. In 2016, Tsai Ing-wen, a pro-independence candidate, became president, further complicating U.S.-Chinese relations. The U.S. continued to support Taiwan, including arms sales, which drew protests from China. In 2020, the United States strengthened ties with Taiwan amid growing tensions with China, including high-profile visits from U.S. officials and increased arms sales. 2022, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan, marking a significant diplomatic gesture and leading to heightened military tensions between the U.S. and China. In 2023, the United States continued to bolster military support for Taiwan, emphasizing its commitment to Taiwan's self-defense and regional stability, while China responded with military drills near the island. Presently, we continue to have problems, and they seem to be getting worse. Now let's discuss the types of support we presently give Taiwan. Let's begin with political support. Taiwan Relations Act of 1979. This legislation is the cornerstone of U.S. policy towards Taiwan. It provides the legal basis for unofficial relations and emphasizes U.S. commitments to Taiwan security. The act requires the U.S. to provide Taiwan with defensive weapons and maintain its ability to resist coercion. Diplomatic engagement. Although the U.S. does not have formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, it engages through unofficial channels. High-level visits by U.S. officials, such as the Secretary of State and members of Congress, underscore political support. Military support. Arms sales. The U.S. regularly sells arms to Taiwan to enhance its self-defense capabilities. This includes advanced weaponry such as fighter jets, missile systems, and naval vessels. Recent notable sales include F-16 fighter jets and advanced missile systems. Military training and cooperation. The U.S. conducts joint military exercises and provides training to Taiwanese forces. This cooperation aims to improve Taiwan's defense readiness and interoperability with U.S. forces. Strategic ambiguity. The U.S. maintains a policy of strategic ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying military intervention in the event of a conflict over Taiwan. This approach aims to deter Chinese aggression while reassuring Taiwan of U.S. support. Economic support. Trade relations. The U.S. is one of Taiwan's largest trading partners, and the two have a strong economic relationship. The U.S. exports significant amounts of goods to Taiwan, including technology and agricultural products. Investment. American companies have substantial investment in Taiwan, particularly in technology and manufacturing sectors. This economic relationship fosters mutual benefits and strengthens ties. Bilateral trade agreements. The U.S. and Taiwan have engaged in discussions about enhancing economic cooperation, including potential free trade agreements and initiatives to reduce trade barriers. Cultural and educational exchanges. People-to-people ties. Various cultural and educational exchange programs promote mutual understanding and cooperation. These programs encourage Taiwanese students to study in the U.S. and facilitate exchanges in arts, science, and technology. Support for democracy. The U.S. actively promotes democratic values in Taiwan and supports its participation in international organizations despite China's efforts to isolate the island diplomatically. Next, we're going to get into framework, but before we do, let's talk about what framework is and how you use framework in a debate round. In public forum debate, framework is like the rules or big idea for how you think the judge should decide who wins the debate. It's the way you explain to the judge what's most important when deciding if something is good or bad. For example, if you're debating about whether the U.S. should reduce military support for Taiwan, you could say that protecting world peace is the most important thing, or maybe you think helping the U.S. economy should matter more. Let's talk about how to use framework in a debate round. Number 1, in your case, the first speech. Right at the beginning, after introducing your arguments, tell the judge what your framework is. In just a moment, I'll be giving you examples of several frameworks you can use in this topic. For example, the most important thing in this debate is keeping world peace, so whichever side can show that they help world peace the most should win. In this case, you can see that the framework is world peace. Number 2, compare to the other side's framework. If the other team says something else is more important, like U.S. economy, explain why your framework is better or more important than theirs. For example, while the economy is important, if we don't have world peace, trade will stop and the economy will suffer anyway. After you've compared your framework to your opponent's, number 3 is refer back to the framework in the round, especially in rebuttals. Throughout the debate, keep coming back to your framework. Show how your arguments fit in with that framework. For example, our side shows that reducing military support will help world peace, and since that's what matters most, we should win. Now let's talk about some of the frameworks that you may use or encounter with this topic. First up, realism versus idealism. Realism is about focusing on what's practical and realistic. The pro team might say, the U.S. needs to focus on its own problems and stop worrying so much about Taiwan. The con team could say that if the U.S. pulls back, it lets China get stronger and take over more power in Asia. Idealism. Idealists think about what's doing right, not just what's easy. So, the pro team might argue the U.S. doesn't need to babysit Taiwan and should let them figure it out on their own. The con team might argue that the U.S. has a duty to protect a democracy like Taiwan and not leave them alone. Next, sovereignty and self-determination. The pro team would argue the U.S. should reduce its support to Taiwan and let it stand on its own feet. Taiwan should learn to protect itself and not depend on U.S. help all the time. The con team would say the U.S. military support actually helps Taiwan stay independent. If the U.S. pulls out, China might take over Taiwan, so the U.S. needs to stay involved to keep Taiwan safe. Third, just war theory. They might say, on the pro side, that the U.S. should avoid getting into any fight unless it's a really fair and necessary one. They could argue that helping Taiwan might not even be worth the risk or meet the criteria of a just or fair war. The con would say that defending Taiwan is a fair cause because it's about protecting a country that stands for democracy and freedom against a more controlling country like China. Utilitarianism. The pro team might say that the U.S. should reduce military support because avoiding a big conflict with China is better for everyone. It's better to focus on what helps most people, like fixing problems in the U.S. instead of fighting abroad. The con team would say, helping Taiwan keeps peace in the region and prevents the bigger war, which actually benefits the whole world more in the long run. Libertarianism. Libertarians believe in freedom and less government control. The pro side might say the U.S. should reduce its military actions abroad and not get involved in Taiwan's defense. On the flip side, some libertarians might argue that keeping Taiwan free from Chinese control is important for liberty, so the U.S. should still support Taiwan's freedom. Next is ethical duty of care. The pro side might say the U.S. has an ethical duty to take care of its own people first. Instead of spending money on Taiwan's defense, it should focus on things like healthcare, education, and jobs at home. The con team would argue that the U.S. has a responsibility to protect Taiwan because they've been friends for so long. If the U.S. doesn't help, Taiwan could fall under China's control, which wouldn't be good for global human rights. Next is pacifism. Pacifists believe war is always wrong, so the pro side might say that any military involvement, even helping Taiwan, is a bad idea. They would prefer peaceful solutions instead of using military force. The con side might argue that keeping military support for Taiwan could actually prevent war because it makes China think twice before attacking. Last is global justice. The pro side might say that the U.S. shouldn't act alone. Instead, it should work together with other countries to help Taiwan, making it more of a team effort. The con side would argue that, as one of the most powerful nations, the U.S. has a responsibility to help weaker countries like Taiwan when they're in trouble, even if it means acting alone sometimes. Let's talk about some of the pro cases you can run using the framework we've discussed. First, a case that focuses on domestic problems. The argument is that the U.S. spends too much money on defending other countries like Taiwan. This money could be better spent on problems at home, like improving schools, fixing roads, and helping people that are struggling. Example, instead of spending billions of dollars in military aid to Taiwan, the U.S. could use that money to make healthcare cheaper or help families who need more support. Number 2, avoid conflict with China. The argument of these types of cases is that by giving so much military support to Taiwan, the U.S. risks getting into a war with China, and reducing military support could help keep the peace and avoid a dangerous fight. Example, if the U.S. continues sending weapons and military aid to Taiwan, China might see that as a threat and decide to start a conflict. Pulling back support could prevent this from happening. Number 3, encourage Taiwan's independence. Taiwan should take care of its own defense. By depending too much on the United States, Taiwan may not fully be prepared to protect itself. Reducing support will encourage Taiwan to be stronger on its own. Example, if the U.S. reduces its military aid, Taiwan will have to invest more in its own army and defense systems, making them more independent. Next, focus on diplomacy, not military. Reducing military support can encourage peaceful negotiations between Taiwan and China. Diplomatic solutions are better than military ones, and the U.S. should promote talks instead of giving weapons. Example, by stepping back from military involvement, the U.S. can push for peace talks between China and Taiwan, avoiding a war and resolving issues through discussions. Next, prevent U.S. overstretch. Argument. The United States is involved in too many international conflicts and commitments, which stretches its military resources too thin. Examples would be Ukraine and Israel. Reducing support for Taiwan would also allow the United States to focus on more pressing global issues or conflicts. Example, the U.S. has military bases and responsibilities all over the world, from Europe to the Middle East. Pulling back from Taiwan would help the U.S. manage its resources more wisely. Last, reduce U.S.-Chinese tensions. The U.S. military support for Taiwan increases tensions with China. Reducing that support could improve U.S.-Chinese relations, leading to better cooperation on important issues like trade and climate change. Example, by cutting back on military aid, the U.S. might improve its relationship with China, leading to more peaceful interactions and possibly fewer trade wars or disputes, making a better economy for both countries. Now let's talk about the con cases. Cases you would run when you were saying that you do not agree with the resolution. First up, protecting democracy. The argument. Taiwan is a democratic country, and the U.S. has a responsibility to help protect democracies around the world. Reducing military support could put Taiwan in danger of being taken over by China, which is not democratic. Example: if the U.S. stops helping Taiwan, China could invade and take away the freedoms Taiwanese people enjoy, like voting and free speech. Next, preventing a bigger war. The U.S. military presence in Taiwan helps keep China from attacking. If the U.S. pulls back, it might actually lead to a war because China could think Taiwan is weaker and easier now to take over. Example: keeping military support strong makes China think twice before starting any aggression. It helps maintain peace in the region by showing that the U.S. will defend Taiwan. Next, maintaining stability in Asia. Taiwan is important for keeping the balance of power in Asia. If the U.S. reduces support, China might become more powerful, which could be bad for other countries in the region like Japan, South Korea, or currently the Philippines. Example: by supporting Taiwan, the U.S. ensures that China doesn't become too powerful and dominate all of Asia. This keeps the peace and stability in the region. Next, U.S. reputation at stake. If the U.S. reduces its military support for Taiwan, other allies might lose trust in the U.S. promises. It could send a message that the U.S. doesn't keep its commitments to its friends. Examples: countries like Japan or South Korea might question whether the U.S. would support them in a crisis if it backs away from helping Taiwan, damaging alliances in Asia. Next, protecting global trade routes. Taiwan is a key location for global trade, especially for shipping routes in the Pacific. If the U.S. reduces its military support, China could take control of these routes, disrupting global trade. Example: much of the world's trade passes through the South China Sea. If China controls Taiwan and its surrounding waters, it could threaten global shipping and hurt economies. U.S. defense industry jobs. Reducing military support for Taiwan could hurt the U.S. defense industry, leading to job losses and economic downturns in the sector. The military aid and equipment the U.S. provides to Taiwan are crucial for keeping defense companies in business. Example: if the U.S. stops selling military equipment to Taiwan, it could lead to job cuts in factories and companies that produce weapons, harming the U.S. economy.
Well, that's about all I have for now. Just got into the topic a couple of days ago. I think this is going to be a wild and exciting topic simply because it's going to be changing like every 5 minutes, depending on what Trump says or anyone else says. So it's going to keep you on your feet. In the meantime, I'm Coach Hill with Cutie Learning. If you have any questions, if you have any ideas, if you want to talk about it, if you want some links, let me know down in the comments. Please like and subscribe. We don't just do debate, we also do IEs. So if you want to be the best you can possibly be, talk to me. I'm here, down below. This is Coach Hill for Cutie Learning. Good luck this semester. Hopefully I'll see you out on the debate trail.